Today is March 29th, the fifth Sunday of Lent, and we're going to go right into our gospel reading. Our scrutiny today concerns the raising of Lazarus. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to John. Now a man was ill, Lazarus from Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. Mary was the one who had anointed the Lord with perfumed oil and dried his feet with her hair. It was her brother Lazarus who was ill. So the sisters sent word to Jesus saying, "Master, the one you love is ill." When Jesus heard this, he said, "This illness is not to end in death, but is for the glory of God, that the Son of God may be glorified through it." Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So when he heard that he was ill, he remained for 2 days in the place where he was. Then after this he said to his disciples, "Let us go back to Judea."
The disciples said to him, "Rabbi, the Jews were just trying to stone you, and you want to go back there?" Jesus answered, "Are there not 12 hours in a day? If one walks during the day, he does not stumble, because he sees the light of this world. But if one walks at night, he stumbles, because the light is not in him." He said this, and then told them, "Our friend Lazarus is asleep, but I am going to waken him." So the disciples said to him, "Master, if he is asleep, he will be saved." But Jesus was talking about his death. And while they thought that he meant ordinary sleep. So then Jesus said to them clearly, "Lazarus has died, and I am glad for you that I was not there, that you may believe. Let us go to him." So Thomas, called Didymus, said to his fellow disciples, "Let us also go to die with him."
When Jesus arrived, he found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days. Now Bethany was near Jerusalem, only about 2 miles away, and many of the Jews had come to Martha and Mary to comfort them about their brother. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went to meet him, but Mary sat at home. Martha said to Jesus, "Lord, if you had been there, my brother would not have died. But even now, I know that whatever you ask of God, God will give you." Jesus said to her, "Your brother will rise." Martha said to him, "I know he will rise in the resurrection on the last day." Jesus told her, "I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me, even if he dies, will live. And everyone who lives and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this?" She said to him, "Yes, Lord, I have come to believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God, the one who is coming into the world."
When she had said this, she went and called her sister Mary, secretly saying, "The teacher is here and is asking for you." As soon as she heard this, she rose quickly and went to him, for Jesus had not yet come into the village, but was still where Martha had met him. So when the Jews who were with her in the house, comforting her, saw Mary get up quickly and go out, they followed her, presuming that she was going to the tomb to weep there. When Mary came to where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet and said to him, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died."
When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who had come with her weeping, he became perturbed and deeply troubled, and said, "Where have you laid him?" They said to him, "Sir, come and see." And Jesus wept. So the Jews said, "See how he loved him." But some of them said, "Could not the one who opened the eyes of the blind man have done something so this man would not have died?"
So Jesus, perturbed again, came to the tomb. It was a cave, and a stone laid across it. Jesus said, "Take away the stone." Martha, the dead man's sister, said to him, "Lord, by now there will be a stench. He has been dead for 4 days." Jesus said to her, Did I not tell you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God?" So they took away the stone, and Jesus raised his eyes and said, "Father, I thank you for hearing me. I know that you always hear me, but because of the crowd here, I have said this, that they may believe that you sent me." And when he had said this, he cried out in a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out!" The dead man came out, tied hand and foot with burial bands, and his face was wrapped in a cloth. So Jesus said to them, "Untie him and let him go."
Now many of the Jews who had come to Mary and seen what he had done began to believe in him. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
Okay, so here we are again. The last scrutiny. These are, as we've talked about before, the scrutinies are the three leading up to the Passion Week. Is supposed to be a progression from the woman at the well to the man born blind, and then culminating in the raising of Lazarus from the dead. So this is God's or Jesus's greatest miracle here. He's going to raise Lazarus from the dead, and he does a few things. Let's set the table here for where we are. Lazarus died of a natural illness. God didn't kill him so that Jesus could come show his divinity. That would be a very arbitrary thing, and there's no indication that this was done so that Jesus could show who he was. Lazarus died of natural illness, and now Jesus comes on the scene to show his divinity. So with that said, we also know that Jesus can heal from a distance. So we've seen him do that. He didn't do that here. Once he realized that Lazarus was dead, he purposely stayed away so that there would be no question. And the length of time, we won't go into it now, but it has its message in Judaism is when, theoretically, the soul has not left the body for a certain period of time. Jesus wanted to make sure that for the believers, for people who were Jews, who were believers in Judaism, they would understand that now the body is really dead. He's not there anymore. So basically, Lazarus didn't die so that the glory of God could be shown. He died, and then the glory of God. So keep that in mind, the progression here. This one's a little easier in terms of what we call exegesis, in terms of given the kind of the translation or the interpretation of it, because it's pretty straightforward. But just some things that we'll talk about here. If you remember back in the Gospels, where Jesus in an encounter with Mary and Martha, Martha gets all upset because Mary won't help. Jesus tells Martha, "Stop being upset. Mary, what she's doing is worshiping me." It kind of goes back to our last week's scrutiny. As long as he's in the world, we need to pay attention to him. He's saying, "I won't be here forever, and then you can go back to doing those things, Martha, that you're being anxious about." Well, we kind of have a flip here, because Mary is the one in this particular case who's kind of freaking out. As a matter of fact, she was so paralyzed by the death of her brother that she couldn't even leave the house. It says Mary sat in the house. Martha is the one who went out to Christ. And there appears to be a little bit of anger on her part when she gets there, because she says, there's no question that Mary and Martha believe that Jesus is the Christ, or that he is, they may not understand the divinity part of it yet, but they believe that he is a miracle worker. They're close friends. Along with their brother, they have been around him. And it's not lost on Martha, at least, that they have put Jesus in danger by him coming there. Because now we are moving towards the crucifixion, and for Jesus to be this close to Jerusalem at this point in the story has put him in danger. So this kind of gives us two things. They are sympathetic to his plight, and And Jesus is letting this play out as it would normally play out here, but he's not. It's not lost on them that he has been put in danger by being here, and they're appreciative of that, Martha. But by the same token, she is at least acknowledging that, why weren't you here? It's almost, maybe you could even say, it's almost like, did you not like him enough to come, or could you not have healed him when you were still in Galilee? And of course the answer would be yes. But once again, this is where Jesus is actually going to seal his fate by raising, in a sense, this starts the wedding at Cana started the countdown. That started his public ministry, but this starts the countdown to Passion Week. He's now he can't escape anymore. He will not leave that area the rest of the way. So we see a similar. Martha says she makes essentially a statement of faith that's very similar in a way to Peter's, but not quite the same. He says to her, and even now I know that whatever you ask from God, he will give it to you. And Jesus said to her, your brother will rise again. And Martha doesn't understand. She's saying, of course he's going to rise again. I believe in the last day resurrection. And that's how she responds to him. She says, I know that he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day. She's showing an ignorance about what Christ is trying to say to her. And he's saying, I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me. He's telling her who he is. And whoever lives and believes in me shall never die. Once again, Martha's, in a southern jargon, she would be saying something to the effect in her mind, well, duh, I get that, but that's not what I'm asking. Why didn't you heal him? I understand the other stuff. He says, and whoever lives and believes in me shall never die. Do you believe this? He asked her. We see that in the blind man. He says, Lord, I believe. So Jesus is querying her on, you say you believe in this, do you believe it? And she says, yes, Lord. And that would be the kurios here. Yes, Lord, I do believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God, he who is coming into the world. Well, in Matthew 16:18, Peter says something similar to that. And also in John chapter 1, Nathanael says something similar to that. He says, Rabbi, you are the Son of God. You are the King of Israel. The contrast between the three, Peter's is more profound because his has been revealed to him by God. Nathanael gets it more naturally. Nathanael is hiding behind the tree or the bush, and Jesus says, I knew you were over there. And Nathanael, in a very natural way, is saying, how could you have known that? And so he, being a believer in Judaism and the Old Testament, he would have said, oh, well, the only way you could know that is if you were in some way supernatural. So in the case of Martha, Martha's just doing it because she's been around him the whole time. It's not a divine revelation to her. She's just saying it in a similar way that the blind man did. I've seen what you've done. I've been with you for most of this 3 years, most likely, and I believe what you're. I believe that you are the Son of God. And by the way, why didn't you raise my brother from the dead? While we're talking about this, why didn't you do that? She's just showing a lack of understanding about what's happening here. So we go on and it says that Jesus wept. The better translation, I think this is really kind of cool. When you look at the translation, it says these are silent tears. He didn't openly weep. He's weeping silently because this person that is very dear to him has passed away. So there's this silent kind of grief that he's showing. He probably wouldn't show it in a more profound, outwardly way. Everybody comes back to the house. They're all consoling them. So Jesus, he tells the disciples, it's kind of interesting here. He says, nothing is going to, they're concerned. Martha and them are, like I said, are aware that they put him in danger. The disciples are aware, and they're nervous about this. They are more openly nervous about it. And Jesus assures them that nothing's going to happen to him until the proper time. This miracle, this passion is going to happen on Jesus' terms, not on the terms of the Pharisees. So, interestingly enough, when Jesus, deeply moved again, came to the tomb, it was a cave and a stone. He says, "Take away the stone." And then, of course, Martha does the natural thing. Once again, she's showing a profound lack of understanding. She said, "Hold on just a minute. This isn't going to be really nice. He's going to smell bad. He's been dead for so long." And Jesus, in a sense, he chastises in a very merciful way. "Did I not tell you that if you would just believe, you would see the glory of God?" So they took away the stone. The verb used here, that for Jesus, when he's saying take away that stone, the Greek verb insinuates anger, but not anger at Lazarus, or not anger at the stone, but he's anger at death. He's angry about original sin. He's angry that death had to come into the world, and he's having to do something. But it's not it's a righteous anger.
Well, don't you think it's kind of like when Jesus wept? It's like he was acting like God, like the Savior, but yet that shows his profound humanity.
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, that was the next thing I was going to say. No, that's beautiful. That's great. His response to Lazarus' death is showing his complete humanity. Mm-hmm. That he's doing what we do when you lose a close friend, you lose a spouse, you lose a child. Even though he's going to do a divine act at raising from the dead, prior to that, he's silently weeping about the death of his friend. So that's great, right? So basically, what the Martha has gone through this whole dialogue with him, talking about the resurrection. Jesus has tried to explain to her that the way this is going to happen. He's going to eventually show his divinity here, and he's going to show his power over death. And for a Jew that was present there, for Martha or Mary or the disciples, they would understand on at least some level that Jesus' power over death, being able to raise Lazarus from the dead, that only God has that. Mm-hmm. Nobody, that has to come from God. It's interesting to note, and I wish y'all were here so we could ask this, is this Lazarus' resurrected body that's going to walk out of the tomb?
No, it's not. It's his earthly body.
Yep.
He's going to have to die again.
He's going to die again. So basically, this is only symbolically showing the resurrection, because Lazarus is going to come out. This is not the end. This isn't the last day when the dead will rise in Christ. This is symbolically is going to show this. If you want to, just for your own self, if you want to go back to Ezekiel chapter 37, it's what the dry bones incidents, and that's kind of, this is looking back to that.
I was watching something on Formed, and they said that he had to say, "Lazarus, come out," because if he had just said, "Come out," everyone in the tomb would have walked out.
It would have been the last, yeah, right. It would have been the last day. Yeah, I'm raising you from the dead. The apostles are very aware of what's going on, and they're probably, I can envision them that they've seen miracles, but they're probably really, their mouths are probably hanging open as they're watching this. They still don't totally get this. I will say this, that, and I teach this every year, and this is it. And every year I learn a little bit more about it. But I will say this: theologians and commentators, they consider Martha's conversation with Jesus here to be one of the most profound dialogues in all of Scripture. Their dialogue is magnificent. It is God speaking to man, And it is man recognize.
No, it's 10 minutes, sorry.
Oh, it is man recognizing, man being mankind, recognizing how important this is. So Martha has shown her profound misunderstanding of the event, but her profound understanding of who Christ is. And commentators throughout the 2,000 years of the church have looked at it that way. The disciples, not so much. They are the interaction with the disciples here is pretty minor, really. They show a little bit of fear. They do recognize the danger that's posed here, but they are there is fairly minor. The narrative here goes from Lazarus dies, and the response of his sisters, and then the raising from the dead, and then the countdown to passion.
And then I was going to say, for the first scrutiny, we saw the water that you would never thirst again. And from the second one, we had the light of the world. And now we have Jesus as the resurrection and the life. So give like a little synopsis of each one of those scrutinies as how they lead the candidates and the catechumen towards the Easter sacraments.
Well, actually, my last sentence here kind of does that, and then we'll talk. And then we can talk about it. The disciples are afraid. They are afraid to go back to Jerusalem here. They show that here. But the sisters, and I'll just give you the quote I wrote here. The sisters are believers who grow in their understanding because they are open to hearing what Jesus is saying. And I think that is what they're listening to, what Jesus is saying. They don't have any preconceived. They have the Old Testament. They have the Hebrew Scriptures, and they have taken what their knowledge of that, and they moved into here, and they have listened rather than being critical and rather than being aggressive about it and saying you're not that. They have been open to hearing it the entire time. And you could probably make the case, even though they are not apostles, you can make the case that their belief and their understanding, especially by this time, has become pretty deep and profound. So to go to that, we start off with the woman at the well. This is a person who really has no background to understand. She has the Torah, but we know that the Torah doesn't give us the prophets. It gives us very limited understanding of the Messiah. Genesis 3:15 gives us a very rudimentary understanding of that. So the woman at the well is a person who is an outcast, who is despised, and who is in a position that her ability to understand is limited because of the knowledge that she has. We go to the man born blind. We are given to believe, or led to believe, that he has no ability. The only thing he's ever done is just be blind. But he is open in the sense that Christ comes by, and what we were talking about earlier, in a very simplistic way. He takes what happens to him and translates that into a very deep, profound understanding of Christ, and then at the end calls him Lord, Kyrios. But then with Martha and Mary, it's they have been with Christ since the beginning, so they're the poster child for, we do know the prophets, we've heard the prophets, and now we're hearing and listening to everything that Christ has said. So for us, we should start as children in our faith, and we should grow in our faith. We should go into our teenage years where we understand a little bit, but maybe a little bit rebellious. We should go into our young adult where we've begun to take on more responsibility in the world for both ourselves and others. And then as we move into old age, like us here, we would hope that our understanding would be more like our age. It would, we would have an understanding that would be leading towards our own passion, so to speak, leading towards our own death.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the way it should happen. But it doesn't, once again, we analogize it to age, but it doesn't, you could be 60 and converting, and it's the process should be the same. You should start out like no knowledge, and then a babe, and then a teenager, then a young adult, and then an old adult. So,
Okay.
comments? We're good?
Oh, no,
Thank
great.
you, and we hope to see you soon. So anyway, thank you for listening, and like I said, hope to see you soon. Bye.
And they were doing back and forth, this amazing theology. And she had obviously been taught all these things by Jesus, all right? So this was her oral exam, as it were. And then the end was, of course, the answer.
And I think it's a neat switch from the Mary and Martha being the busy one and Mary choosing the higher way, but then we see in this place
Martha was the A student. Yeah.
Martha was the one, like Mary was paralyzed and couldn't even leave the house, but yet Martha, I believe that you are
Well,
Christ.
I think it's interesting there. You're not taping, are you? Oh. I think it's interesting here in that she confronts Jesus. She has no fear about confronting him, and you can only get that from knowing him.
From being that close.
Mhm.
Yes.
Yeah.
You don't. The Pharisees confronted him, but they didn't do it with pure hearts. She comes out there with a pure heart and confronts him on essentially a theological issue,
right.
and says to him, calls him out on it. And he doesn't answer with anger, he answers with, basically, the inference is he answers with, I understand what you're saying. I get it.
And that could be like an example to us about going to God. Like if something happens and we just don't really see the point, like we can say that to him. We can go and say, well, if you would have been here, my brother wouldn't have died, and that was a very logical thing for her to say. And she said it, and he answered, and she got her answer.
Yeah, and then she can only, like you said, she can only get that. I think the thing that's interesting about it is that it says that she grew in her faith. She grew because she was open to it and she listened. And it goes back to I love the St. Francis way, and I like the St. Thomas Aquinas and St. Bonaventure way. And interestingly enough, what you were saying about Francis and Bonaventure being from the same order, taking two different paths to get to the same place. Bonaventure says it can be done here, it should go from here to here, and Francis says it goes from here, that kind of thing.
Well, it's like taking the spiritual and the corporal works of mercy, because a correlation between like feed the hungry or instruct the ignorant. I mean, you can do it in a physical way or you can do it in a spiritual way, and both are necessary.
Yeah, even with the common quote from St. Francis, use words if
When
necessary.
necessary.
In the end, though, you have to speak. There's that spoken word is the consummation of the evangelistic act.
Well, we all
So-
have calls that are more, maybe stronger in one area or the other, but we're all called to everything. You know what I mean? Like you might be someone who's out there, helping with your hands, doing stuff, but you're still called to the spiritual path. And people who are, mainly educating or spiritual, they're still called to do physical acts of mercy.
It's not either or, it's both and, but it goes to that notion too that you may only have a one-time encounter with someone, and with a once encounter, they don't know you, they can't see your life.
Right.
There has to be words and deeds.
Yeah.
Because if you're only going to see this person one time and then you're going to walk away, then you have to leave them with at least the thought of this.
Who is he that I might believe in him?
Yes. Yeah.
We were talking because of the confirmation students and the youth department and stuff, and I said, you guys, your main job is to plant seeds. you know, don't ever despair because everybody walks out of there acting like it was a waste of everyone's time, because you don't know what you've put into somebody that 10 years down the line someone isn't going to harvest, you know?
No, I agree. It's a hard, it's just, as Mike and I can attest, that's a difficult.
Yeah, I know it's hard, but it made me I think it made that youth person I was talking to feel a little bit better because, well, like you said, you're leaving them with something. You know, don't leave them with nothing. Give them something, whether you see any fruit or not. You're still leaving them with a seed, and you have no idea who's going to water it and who's eventually going to harvest it.
And also, it goes to, and you've done your part.
Right.
You know, you've done your part. So, and if they don't respond, then they have an obligation. So if you plant the seed, you've met your. I'm not saying you should not ever do anything again if you have the opportunity, but if you have a one-time encounter and you plant the seed, then the other person has an obligation. They're there to respond to that or not respond. As Father Barron will say, everybody has to answer as to who is he.
Right.
We saw
right.
that.
Oh,
That's
yeah,
our
who
needs
is,
are-
yeah,
yeah.
who is he?
Whether it's
Yeah.
Jesus as Jesus or Jesus as God the Father or God the Son. From the deepest jungles of Africa to Jerusalem to America, everybody has to answer the question about God. Well, somebody has to put that notion there, though. But once you've met your obligation is to just not fail in that, or yours or mine, is to not fail when the person stands in front of you and you're given the opportunity to plant the seed.
And I think the reward is the same.
Absolutely.
If you're working with someone and it comes to fruition, it's because someone planted a seed years ago, and you just don't know when you're planting those seeds where they're gonna, how they're gonna end up. So,
No, you don't.
interesting. Well, thanks, guys.